Hello, listeners. Welcome to Marie Lives the Horror. This is episode 37 of the series of True Paranormal Ghost Stories. In tonight's episode, we hear of a unique paranormal tale from a World War II veteran. Some strange happenings unsettle a couple of workers at a crematorium. And we also hear a timeline of spooky encounters that seem to have followed the author of the story wherever they go. So without further ado, step into my horror chamber as we live the horror together. Number 1. My father's paranormal experience during World War II. My late father was a World War II battle-hardened soldier and a down-to-earth man not given to flights of fancy or imagination. But the story he told me some 20 years ago unsettled him as he could not understand or explain it. In the early 1950s, my father was serving in the airborne and was making his way up by train from Aldershot to Catterick on a Sunday service. He told me he had to disembark and wait for his connection alone at a small and isolated station en route. The landscape was flat, and a long road ran from horizon to horizon across the front of the station. After waiting some time, he was getting concerned as to when the train was going to turn up, if it was going to turn up at all. In the distance, he saw two figures approaching on the road. As they got nearer, he saw they were an elderly man and woman. He stepped out into the road to wait for them. As they got near, he asked if the train was due anytime soon. The old lady assured him the train would be along in just a few minutes. All the time he was talking to her, he noticed the old man said nothing but just grinned. My father said, "What's the matter with him?" She replied, "Oh, take no notice of him. He is not there." The couple then walked on. My father thought this strange, but thought he'd misheard and that she must have actually said, "He's not all there." Just then, my father heard his train approaching and turned to call out to the couple to thank them, but the old woman was walking down the road alone. My father looked everywhere for the man, but he was nowhere to be seen. My father said the land was flat all the way to the horizon in all directions. There were no ditches or trees or buildings for him to hide in or behind. Then, with a chill, he realized the meaning of her words. He's not there. Number 2. Spooky as experience. So, I'm a 23-year-old man, and I recently had an experience quite unlike any of my lifetime. I live in a community housing project. I would say it's half a hotel/motel and half apartment. It's one building with 3 floors of maybe about 20 different studio bedrooms on each floor, and 2 other buildings with the same, except these are 2 bedrooms. That's neither here nor there, just trying to give some perspective. I have been staying at this place for about 8 months now. I haven't really had any problems at all. I wouldn't say this is a problem, not as of yet at least. Now, there was an old lady that stayed directly across from me, She must have had some kind of a rough life because she broke down pretty bad mentally over time. Every night, since I first moved here, I would hear her screaming and yelling and cursing, literally having whole entire conversations. Now, this was weird from the jump. After the first few days, when I realized she lives completely alone, I heard her literally making threats every night and sometimes crying and apologizing to someone. Now, after a while, I actually ended up getting used to this behavior. Sometimes I would actually bump into her, not literally in the hall. No one talked to her, and she just pointed at everybody and would say the most vicious, evil things to literally everybody. Our first encounter, I was met with this same treatment. I fake smiled it off and asked how she was doing, because ever since the death of my grandmother in 2014, I for some reason have an extreme soft spot and instant love for old ladies. Not in a weird kind of way. Just kind of like, how are you? Let me help you with your bags, ma'am, kind of way. I approached this lady in a similar fashion, and she seemed to didn't know how to take it. But she did not meet me with that same aggression as she does to anyone else she laid her eyes on. Now, remember when I said I was 8 months here? Yeah, fast forward to about July 1st, just several weeks ago, by the way. By this time, me and this lady have crossed paths about 9 to 10 times, briefly, but a few times. We never really had a conversation at all, but I would always make sure I spoke and acknowledged the woman, and she didn't really show emotion, but a little gratitude. Now, every day, all day, she would still continue this manic-like screaming in her room. She very literally was sounding like an older, very angry middle-aged man. Now, as I said, I was directly across from her, but we are also right dead at the end of our long-ass hallway, and to make things even better, I have a 10-hour shift job that I work 4 to 5 days a week. At that, I am working 5 p.m. to 4 a.m. shifts. So just imagine a long day of work. You get to your home, you're at the very end of the hall, almost isolated with this lady. At 4 a.m., we know it is very early, but very late too. Also, it's still dark outside when I pull up to my apartment. It would be fucking 4:30, and this woman is still up, barking, growling, shouting evil, haunting, spooky shit. Sounding like a man. I swear this is absolutely no exaggeration. Now, on to the scary part. Right now it is 4:14 a.m. as I type this. I actually took a day off today, and I think I may take another to wrap my mind around what has happened in the last few days. On July 18th, roughly around 6 a.m., this is Sunday morning, the woman was found dead in her room right across from me. She was not killed, nobody ever came to see her or anything. She had no relationships as far as any resident here ever knew. A maintenance man would check on her at least once a day because, like me, he felt very bad for the old woman. When he checked on her on this day, he seen her and obviously reported it. She was found at 6 a.m. They had her wrapped up and gone by 9 a.m. From what I was told, really didn't ask much, they say it was natural causes or suicide. Now, I spent this past weekend at my girlfriend's, so I was not present when whatever happened. But when I returned to my apartment Sunday at around maybe like 11:30 to 12, I walked the halls and literally for the first time in 8 months, I heard no screaming. Now keep in mind I have no knowledge of what has happened. I am walking to my door. I see absolutely no one in sight. I turn and stick my key in. and I hear a familiar voice. It's the old lady, but she looks much, much different. She looked cleaner, looked happy, hair was not all over the place from constantly running into the walls, and she actually spoke clearly. She saw me and said, "Hey," and I was shocked at just that simple 3-letter basic greeting from this woman. Honestly, with the events that transpired, I cannot remember our exact conversation verbatim, but it was literally happiest and best I've ever seen her. It took me 3 seconds to realize it was her. Now keep in mind, once again, I am not knowledgeable of her death. At this point in my encounter with her, it was approaching 12 p.m. She allegedly died at 6 a.m. But anyways, we had a brief conversation, and I said, "I'll see you later, ma'am. I'm a little tired. You look beautiful today." She said, "I'll see you again, young man." She said this and walked back into her apartment. It was something about her. She had a certain glow to her, a certain force and energy that I had never felt before from her. But anyways, now at this time, I think nothing about it, and I go in my house and shut my door and use the restroom. A lady from the rental office, who I am close with, look at as a godmother called Miss Tate, came and knocked on my door. I opened my door and she asked me how I was doing. I told her, "Fine, just chilling. You know, the usual." She had a very shook, horrified, and sad look on her face. She said, "Have you heard about the incident?" I said, "No, what's going on?" She says, "The woman across the hall from you took her own life this morning." Now I look at her and say nothing for like legitimately 15 seconds. I ask, "Are you talking about the screaming lady across the hall?" She says yes. And I ask, "Are you sure it was her?" She gives me a confused look before quickly saying, "I saw that lady with my own eyes, sweetie." I said, "I seen her with my own eyes too, just 15 to 20 minutes ago." "Miss Tate, I don't know if this was supposed to be a joke or what, but you need to give this up." She looked dumbfounded, and we nearly had a bad argument, and I said, "Let's go to her room right now." She repeatedly says, "I'm not going. You can go all you want." She was saying she was never going to go into that room again. Now, Miss Tate cooled down and she actually showed me all the proof and paperwork, and now I am literally lost for words. I never even got that woman's name. Miss Tate told me she suffered from extreme schizophrenia and dementia. Also, she had a very sad last half of her life. Can someone please explain this to me? Share your thoughts, anybody. Number 3. Crematorium experiences. For a while, I worked in 2 crematoriums, one very modern and up-to-date, the other one of the oldest in the UK. In the modern one, no inexplicable activity. In the 1920s crematorium, it was very alive. Myself and 2 other middle-aged gentlemen worked in the chapel and doing the cremations. It got to the point where we took orbs and shadowy figures in the crematory and catafalque to be an unremarkable event. One afternoon, I was working in the smaller West Chapel. There was no one in the building. I was standing at the chapel door to receive the deceased, minister, and cortege. They duly arrived on time. I spoke with the FD and minister. The funeral party arranged themselves and were ready to enter the chapel. It was at this point I heard a long, deep sigh between myself and the door, about a foot from my shoulder. I said very quietly, "Don't worry, it'll be fine." All the funeral party were about 20 minutes away, and there was still no one in the chapel. I pressed the button to play the music on entry, and the service began. On a scale, I suppose it hardly registers, but the fact that I can recall it 10 years after marks it as unusual. This was one of the more gentle events. Another very odd item from the crematorium where I worked a number of years ago. This genuinely happened on Halloween. We had been particularly busy in October. Apart from the seasonal increase in deaths, we were also helping a nearby crematorium whose cremators had failed. The gentleman I was working with was known as the Viper, a wonderful work colleague and friend. He and I worked late due to the number of cremations that day. It had been very active, that shift. Lots of orbs, so many that we remarked on it. Mr. V had been working on the cremators, and I was sorting both chapels. We were weary, and our conversation returned to the odd events of the day as we turned off the crematory lights, locked up, and set the alarm for the building. The Viper said he never experienced such a curious shift there. "I don't know what was going on in there today, Mr. B. I think they were busier than we were." We both laughed, and the Viper turned to look at the crematory and said, "Good night, everyone. Sleep well." Each of the 4 cremators has a metal bin that holds the cremated remains of the deceased. They are at the bottom of each unit, and the ashes cool before being cremulated, reduced in size. Each of these bins rattled very, very loudly, one after the other, as if an individual was walking along the bank of cremators. The bins, when full weight, take a bit of effort to move, even more so when they are on the machines. This lasted about 15 seconds in total. The Viper and I were in almost total darkness, so we couldn't read each other's reactions. I said, "I'm glad it's your turn to close the cemetery gate this evening, Mr. V." Neither of us cared to look back towards the building that evening. Number 4. Shadow people and other things. Here are some experiences that I have had. Long story. So just to clarify, I do believe in the paranormal, and these are some experiences that have happened to me throughout my childhood/teen and now adult years. I have been a little bit skeptic on about some of my sightings, but I'm not too sure. Anyway, here is some of my experiences. The story jumps to different times as when I have had experiences. When I was about 9 to 10 years old, I kept having this strange feeling every time I went into my parents' bedroom of being watched by something that wasn't there. It was always in one corner of the room. At the time, it felt strange, but as I got older, I could feel it was a presence of a child's spirit. I never saw them, just felt the energy there, and they were always watching me. When I said about it to my parents, they told me it was nothing and just my imagination. This went on for a few years, and eventually I came to live with it, as I never felt like it would hurt me. Moving on a few years, 12 to 13, I was in my bedroom with the door open, and suddenly I saw a black shadow run across the doorway and disappear into the bathroom. At the time, I was freaked, and I wasn't sure what I had seen, but I never saw it again until I was a lot older. At the same time, unexplained voices would whisper my own name into my ear, or I would hear someone call me to find out I wasn't being called. When I would go upstairs, I always got the sense of uneasiness. I was being watched, even when I was home alone. I would always be constantly looking over my shoulder in case something was there, and nothing was. One time, being home alone, I was in the living room with my dog watching TV when my dog jumped up and kept looking out of the doorway, looking at the stairs. She would look for long periods of time and sometimes letting out a small growl. Turning on all the lights in the house that night to reveal nothing again. Just a side note, the stereo system my mom has always turns on and off by itself and has done for years. We have changed the outlet and gotten a new cord for it, but it still does it. It's very strange. Going on to when I was 18, present, I'm 22 now, the shadow people keep showing up in my house, especially on the landing of the stairs and walking past my door. They always seem to be a long black mass/shadow, and they never want to come close to me. I did have one experience where the shadow ran at me, but as soon as I made eye contact with it, it disappeared. My boyfriend once house sat for us, and even he said he saw shadow people walking across the doorway. We both have seen them at the same time, where it came up the stairs, around the railing, and walked/floated into my parents' room. We have even seen it peeking around the doorway almost like it was watching us. I have tried to make eye contact with it, talking to it when I see it, but it just disappears. Whenever they come close and I look in their direction, they just seem to vanish. I like to think they are scared of me, or I must hold some strange presence. I would say that I am sensitive to things and picking up energies in places that I go normally. My body reacts by goosebumps or a tingle down my spine, or I get this anxiety feeling. The rest of my family who I live with have never seen shadow people in the house, just only myself and my boyfriend. As I am writing this, I haven't seen a shadow person in a while, but who knows when it will show itself again. Here's another experience that I have had. This one particular night, it was my first time staying at my boyfriend's house. I was excited and also nervous. We watched movies until we both felt tired. As both of us were getting ready for bed, my boyfriend went to the bathroom, leaving me alone in the room. I didn't feel anything strange at this time. As I was getting ready, I saw a shadow run past the ajar door. I wasn't sure if I saw right, and I pulled the door open to reveal an empty landing. And it wasn't his parents because they were away for the weekend, and his older brother was in his room across the way. I could hear him playing his video game. I thought it was my boyfriend playing a trick, but then I saw him coming out of the bathroom walking towards me. When he asked me what was wrong, I told him that I saw someone run past the door. He laughed and said that I was being silly. I shook it off as I thought that it was just my mind playing tricks on me. However, during the night, I woke up to hear people having a conversation downstairs. I laid there awake, trying to listen to the conversation, but I couldn't make out what was being said, and I was too scared to get up and investigate. At some point, I must have fell back asleep because it was now morning. I said to my boyfriend about me hearing voices downstairs, and it sounded like someone was having a conversation. Even he was confused. We even asked his brother if he was talking to someone late that night, to which he said no, he wasn't talking to anyone. By now, I was getting a little worried, as I knew there was something off about my boyfriend's house. He told me that when he was younger, he saw a man in the bathroom, and also his mom heard someone talking when she was alone in the house one time. I was intrigued, but also had shivers. He also told me that sometimes the handles of the side table move on their own, and they are tough to move. You need a bit of force to move them. I like to think that I am somewhat in tune with the spirit world, as I can pick up on energies, and when I first went around my boyfriend's house, I knew something wasn't right with the energy of the house, despite having a warm welcome from his parents and family. When he was dropping me home that day, he proceeded to tell me that the previous owner of the house that my boyfriend now lives in had died in the house. Now knowing this information, I feel on edge about staying at his house. Even one night, I witnessed one of his figurines fall off the shelf unprovoked. I placed it back, having to rule out any possibilities. Was it uneven? Was there a draft? Is the shelf uneven too? All of which came up negative. My boyfriend joked, saying that this figure falls all the time randomly. We even placed it on a different shelf to see if it would do it, and it did. So coming to the conclusion that my boyfriend's house is definitely haunted, and he jokes about it, but I'm sure that the spirit of the house seems to like me, as it only seems to be active when I'm around. So, I just wanted to see what people thought from my experiences. Most of my family have had some type of paranormal experiences. It kinda runs in the family, I guess. Let me know what you think, and is there anything that I can do? Hello, listeners. Thank you for listening to tonight's episode of True Paranormal Ghost Stories as you live the horror with me. If you have a true ghost story that you would like for me to feature in a future episode, please send a message to any of the contact links in the description. If you enjoyed tonight's video, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell to keep up with future content. Thanks again for listening, and as always, I am your host, Marie Lives the Horror.